There are many moments in gaming that have left an everlasting imprint on me. Things that have stuck with me throughout time, such as that moment in MGS2, also being told to turn off my PlayStation and doing so, the boss fight with Sorrow in MGS3, Aerith's death in the OG Final Fantasy VII had me bawling my eyes out at 11 years old, and of course ending E of Nier Automata, which changed my life. I could waste your time listing out all the other moments that stuck with me, but we'd be here all day, so let's move on. So what makes a video game moment stick with me? Well, it's usually the emotional impression. For instance, I will never forget how I felt after playing Tomb Raider 2 and being basically congratulated for killing over 300 things, most of them human, in the game. From the perspective of the game, this was an achievement, but to me, it was disturbing. This memory has stuck with me for decades, seeing as how that happened when I was 12 and I am now pushing 40. This wasn't intentional game design, however. It was just an end screen telling me my in-game stats. My response was due to being a lonely kid who thought too much. But there are some emotional instances in games that are very much intended to stick with you for the long haul, and today I'm going to be talking about one of those moments. For those of you familiar with my channel, you probably already know my two favorite games, Nier Automata and Death Stranding. Both of these games are full of emotional moments meant to plant themselves in your brain and bloom into deeper thoughts over time. Nier Automata has what I consider the greatest ending to a game ever, a moment that teaches you the importance of sacrifice in helping others. Anyone who has gotten ending E already knows what I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil the Nier series in this video, but I will also say that the ending of Nier Gestalt/Replicant has a similar impact, not because of any kind of grand sacrifice, but because of the revelations made. The Nier series changed my life, much like Death Stranding did. Ending E was that moment for me, the moment I realized that Nier Automata was my favorite game ever made. Death Stranding is a long and arduous journey, and much like Nier Automata, it has stuck with me over time. From beginning to end, you are walking through deserted landscapes making deliveries. That's the gameplay loop, and for a gamer like me, it's pretty satisfying. Death Stranding, like Dark Souls, is for a certain type of gamer. Dark Souls and Death Stranding have about zero in common, but I often compare the two due to how they both cater to specific audiences and are unapologetic about it. Dark Souls is for hardcore gamers, offering relentless challenges that often feel impossible to overcome. When you finally do beat that boss you've spent hours on, you are left with a feeling of accomplishment. Death Stranding offers you the chance to help as many people as possible in a broken world, and this leads to tons of emotional moments that often leave the player feeling fulfilled and overwhelmed. Both games are demanding, both require patience, and both games are, again, completely unapologetic about what they are and who they're for. If you think Dark Souls needs an easy mode, the game ain't for you. If you don't want to play through hours of walking punctuated by extreme stress and relief, Death Stranding definitely isn't for you. But for those who have played through Death Stranding, there is one moment in particular that seems to make people love the game, a moment that caught me off guard the first time I played, a moment that was specifically designed to induce a feeling of relief after extreme stress. This moment set the tone for the rest of the game. You see, this moment is in what could still be considered the introduction of the game. Depending on how you play, you could encounter this moment 10 or so hours in, and if you speedrun it, it takes a couple hours to get there. But it is essentially the beginning, and it's when the player is still learning the ins and outs of dealing with BTs, which is one of the main threats of the game. At this point, you are likely easily lost and confused by the landscape, and not used to dealing with large swarms of BTs. You've been given an important delivery, and it is reiterated in the story that a lot is riding on this quest. As you start heading towards your destination, the timefall starts. Now, timefall is rain that ages everything it touches at an accelerated rate, including humans. Timefall is the other major threat in this game, by the way. When timefall shows up, BTs are usually close behind. Now, timefall slowly degrades your packages, putting a time limit on your travel. This means you gotta do things quickly if you want to get the items inside to their destinations without them being damaged. As you might imagine, this puts a player under a lot of stress, especially since there are many BTs in a narrow valley that you must cross. You cannot get to your destination without going through there. You've got a player who is likely not used to dealing with BTs, you've got timefall degrading the quality of your packages, you've got the awesome sound design that induces fear and anxiety, and on top of all that, you've got a crying baby with you who is supposed to detect the BTs, but can also stop working if it's under too much stress, something else the player was previously informed about before this mission. Now, to be fair, it's hard to ever get the BB, that's what the baby is called, to the point where it's not working. But I believe the game design was counting on you still being afraid of that happening, especially since the first time you travel through here, it feels much longer than it actually is. Another factor is that you've just been given weapons that can possibly combat BTs, but the player likely doesn't know how to use them. The first time I did this mission, I chose to stealth it and didn't bother using my weapons at all because I was too nervous. Now, Imagine all that stress that I just described lasting for a good 10, 20, hell, maybe even 30 minutes. Imagine wanting to quit or being caught and losing your cargo. Imagine that you're constantly worried about your packages being destroyed by the rain. Imagine that you get caught by a BT and dragged away into a boss fight, because that's what happens when you do get caught by a BT. It drags you off, and then you have to fight like a mini boss. Now I want you to imagine that none of that happens and you get through the valley. The BTs disappear, the rain eventually stops, and you're standing on a ridge overlooking a beautiful landscape. And then there it is, your destination. A clear sky, no BTs, no rain, and the most moving part of all, a song kicks in. The song is mellow, melancholic, slow, it has beautiful lyrics, and it relieves all the stress that you were previously under in an instant. Ladies and gentlemen, this is game design at its finest. This entire segment was perfectly planned, right from the moment that you get the order down to when the music kicks in. I remember the first time I played Death Stranding, it was this moment that told me I was going to love this game forever. And I'm not alone in this. If you check the comments on the video of the song, you see tons of people saying this moment was incredibly emotional for them. Now, I can't play the song because I'd get a strike right away, but it's called Asylums for the Feeling by Silent Poets, featuring Layla Adu. I'm probably not pronouncing her name right, I do apologize. If you're watching this video, I assume you've played Death Stranding and are aware of how the music is utilized to enrich the story and gameplay, but it's this particular moment that stands above almost every other use of music in the game. It's genius. When I first reached that ridge, I started crying, and when I went to do this mission again for footage for this video, I couldn't stop myself from tearing up when the music kicked in, and that was knowing exactly what I was doing. There was something special about the way this part of the game was designed, to the point where people who were ready to give up on the game did a 180 and began to love and adore every second of it after this moment. I'm not going to say I was ready to give up on the game, but I was frustrated with certain aspects of it. And then Asylums for the Feeling played, and I knew then and there, this game was extraordinary, and I needed to finish it. There's a question during Ending E of Nier Automata that asks, are games just silly little things? And given how many times games have changed my perspective or impacted me emotionally, I stand by my answer of no. Death Stranding wasn't just a game to me, it was a life-changing experience that made me grow as a person. If you haven't played this game, I would recommend you give it at least a try. You never know, you might stumble into a new favorite game the same way I did.